Eddie buys groceries. Eddie is at home. It is Saturday morning. Eddie is in the kitchen. Mom is making breakfast. She opens the refrigerator. She looks inside. "Oh no," Mom says. Eddie looks at her. "What is wrong?" he asks. "We have no eggs," Mom says. She opens another door. "And we have no bread." Eddie looks at the table. There is butter. There is jam. There is milk. But there are no eggs. There is no bread. Mom looks at Eddie. "Can you go to the store?" she asks. Eddie smiles. "Yes, I can." Mom gives Eddie a small shopping list. Eddie reads the list. Eggs, bread, apples, milk. Eddie nods. "Eggs, bread, apples, and milk," he says. Mom gives him some money. "Be careful," she says. "I will," Eddie says. Mom smiles. "And do not forget the list." Eddie puts the list in his pocket. "I will not forget." Then Eddie opens the door. He walks outside. The sun is bright. The air is cool. Eddie walks down the street. He sees a bus. He sees a dog. He sees an old man with a newspaper. The store is not far. Eddie walks for 5 minutes. Then he sees the grocery store. The sign says, "Fresh Market." Eddie goes inside. The store is busy. People are walking. People are shopping. People are putting food in baskets. Eddie takes a small basket. He puts the basket on his arm. "Eggs, bread, apples, and milk," he says. First, Eddie sees fruit. There are bananas. There are oranges. There are grapes. There are apples. Eddie smiles. "Apples," he says. He takes 4 red apples. He puts them in his basket. 1, 2, 3, 4, Eddie counts. Then he looks at his list. Apples. Good. Now Eddie needs bread. He walks to the bread section. There are many kinds of bread. Big bread, small bread, white bread, brown bread, round bread, long bread. Eddie looks confused. "Which bread?" he says. He looks at the list again. The list only says bread. Eddie picks up 1 loaf of bread. Then he puts it back. He picks up another loaf. Then he puts it back. A store worker sees Eddie. "Do you need help?" the worker asks. Eddie nods. "Yes, please. I need bread." The worker smiles. "What kind of bread?" Eddie looks at the list. It just says bread. The worker points to 1 shelf. "This bread is good for toast," he says. Eddie smiles. "Toast! Yes, we need toast." He takes the bread. "Thank you," Eddie says. "You're welcome," the worker says. Eddie puts the bread in his basket. Now he needs eggs. "Eggs, eggs, eggs," Eddie says. He walks past the rice. He walks past the soup. He walks past the cookies. Then he sees the eggs. The eggs are in white boxes. Eddie takes 1 box. He opens it carefully. There are 12 eggs inside. None of the eggs are broken. "Good," Eddie says. He closes the box. He puts the eggs in his basket, but he puts them under the apples. Then he stops. "Wait," Eddie says. He looks at the eggs. He looks at the apples. The apples are heavy. He takes the apples out. He moves the eggs to the top. "There," he says. "Safe eggs." Now Eddie needs milk. He walks to the cold section. It is cold there. There is cheese, there is yogurt, there is juice, there is milk. Eddie sees many bottles of milk. Small bottles, big bottles, white bottles, blue bottles. Eddie looks at the list. Milk, he says. He takes a big bottle of milk. It is cold. It is heavy. Eddie puts it in his basket. Now the basket is very heavy. Oh, Eddie says, this is heavy. He looks at the list again. Eggs, bread, apples, milk. I have everything, Eddie says. He walks to the checkout. There is a short line. Eddie waits. A woman is buying vegetables. A man is buying fish. A little girl is buying candy. Then it is Eddie's turn. The cashier smiles. Hello, she says. Hello, Eddie says. Eddie puts the food on the counter. First, the milk, then the bread, then the apples, then the eggs. The cashier looks at the eggs. You were careful, she says. Eddie nods. Yes, eggs break easily. The cashier laughs. That is true. She puts the food in a bag. Eddie gives her the money. She gives him some change. Thank you, Eddie says. Have a nice day, the cashier says. Eddie takes the bag. It is heavy. He holds it with 2 hands. He walks out of the store. On the street, Eddie walks slowly. The bag is heavy. The milk is heavy. The apples are heavy. Eddie stops near a bench. He puts the bag down. My arms are tired, he says. He rests for a moment. Then he picks up the bag again. I can do it, he says. He walks home, step by step, slowly, slowly. Soon, Eddie sees his house. Mom opens the door. Eddie, you are back, she says. Yes, Eddie says. And I have the food. Mom takes the bag. She looks inside. Eggs, bread, apples, milk. She smiles. You got everything. Eddie smiles too. I used the list. Mom takes out the eggs. She opens the box. All the eggs are safe. No broken eggs, Mom says. Eddie looks proud. I moved them to the top. That was smart, Mom says. Eddie sits at the table. Mom makes breakfast. She cooks the eggs. She makes toast. She cuts the apples. She pours the milk. Soon, breakfast is ready. Eddie takes a bite of toast. It is warm and good. Mom puts eggs on his plate. Thank you for helping, she says. Eddie smiles. You're welcome. Mom asks, was the store easy? Eddie thinks for a moment. Yes, he says. But bread is difficult. Mom laughs. Bread is difficult? There are too many kinds, Eddie says. Mom laughs again. Eddie drinks his milk. Then he looks at the shopping list. Next time, Eddie says, please write the kind of bread. Mom nods. That is a good idea. Eddie takes another bite of toast. Then he smiles. But this bread is good. Mom smiles. Yes, it is. Eddie looks happy. He helped Mom. He bought the food. He carried the heavy bag. And all the eggs were safe. It was a good Saturday morning.